Okay, we'll introduce the next presentation. Our next presentation will be on the FDA Retail Flexible Funding Model. I'm pleased to introduce Maribeth Niesen, Consumer Safety Officer, the Office of Partnerships at the US FDA. Welcome, Maribeth.
Thanks, Tricinda. I'm glad to be here to get to talk to everybody today. I wanted to just one quick shout out to Crystal Reed and AFDO. Many of the people at AFDO that have been working behind the scenes are aware that I had a family emergency over the last week and a half. I'm usually very detailed in making sure that my presentations have no mistakes. And at 5 to 1 today, I found a mistake and she calmly said, send it over, we'll handle it. So a special shout out and thank you to all those at AFDO working behind the scenes to make this workable, okay? So today we're going to talk about the Retail Program Standards Grant opportunity. As many of you know, we've had programs in the past that opportunity to advance your program and utilize some grant funding has not changed, but how we're going to administer it and how we're going to encourage participation is a little bit different. We've been talking about that over the last several months, so this probably isn't new to the majority of you. So the presentation today, for those that have been following this for quite some time now, is not going to be the very detailed information about the flexible funding model. We've provided that over the last several months, both presentations that I've done at different conferences, 50 state calls, different activities that we've done. In addition, your retail food specialists have reached out with a lot of information, including a copy of either the presentation video that I did, where you can get all those details, or they've maybe presented the information themselves about the retail flexible funding model in detail. If for some reason you haven't gotten that, or maybe you weren't interested at the time and you are now at getting those very minute details about the flexible funding model, please reach out to your retail food specialist and let them provide that information to you. I wanted to take today's opportunity to kind of bridge the gap between the vision of the retail flexible funding model and putting it into practice where people can apply for those grants. So that's what we're going to look at today. Next slide, please. Or do you want me to do it myself? Please let me know. Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, so we will have 4 main objectives today. Of course, I'll provide that brief overview of the flexible funding model. I'm also going to provide information on how the flexible funding model is presented in the application portal, so you'll have an idea. I'll explain some various terms of the flexible funding model that seem to be a little bit challenging, but I think once they're explained, you'll think, well, we already have that, or we've already done that. We just call it something else. So we'll talk about those things. I'm also going to provide some resource information that can assist you all in putting together your best application or assisting your jurisdiction, whether it's with the retail program standards and utilizing your retail specialist, or whether it's getting some help with the portal and reaching out to our partner. So next slide, please. Great. So as you can see on the screen, this is the retail flexible funding model. This is a very basic view of it, and many of you have seen this over time, as I mentioned before. We've walked through all the specific details, but in general, as a refresher for the majority of you, there's 2 basic portions of the flexible funding model. One is what's on the left of your screen, right? That's the development or the maintenance advancement boxes. These are what we call base funding. You have to choose one of those before you jump into all the things on the right. That's where all the arrows are pointing. And there's different levels of funding and there's different levels of requirements for each of these things, but this is the basic model. Again, development's really the jurisdictions are getting started, or maybe they're renewing their interest in the retail program standards, or maybe, COVID slowed down their activities, but they're having a, I don't want to call it a renaissance, because we know food safety is still going on, whether COVID has been here or not, but you're getting the opportunity to get a little breathing room in some states to get back into the retail program standards. Development would be a great opportunity for you. There's also the maintenance and advancement. Of course, this is for jurisdictions that are ready to take on those big chunks to advance their program and advance their retail safety activities within their jurisdiction. And so it has an opportunity to work on maintenance activities and self-assessments and all, continuous improvement and different activities associated with that, okay? And I'll briefly walk through these as it is associated with the portal. But again, the minute details aren't in there. So if you want more, please reach out to the retail food specialist. There's again 4 add-ons that could be available to you depending on what you pick for your base box. There's mentorship, training staff development, and program standards engagement, capacity building, and special projects. Next slide, please. As many of you know, our partnership, our cooperative agreement was the National Environmental Health Association. We are working with them over the next 3 years to administer the retail flexible funding model. They're the ones that are developing the portal and the simplified application so that they take the vision of the flexible funding model and put it into a format that jurisdictions that are enrolled can apply to get this grant funding. We're going to walk through that process. I will tell you, NEHA has been working very hard to take the robust funding that we have developed over the last couple of years at FDA and put it in a format that you all can apply and understand as you go through the process. And they've been doing a very good job at doing that. So as we look through the next several slides, you're going to see some what I'll call clip art or pictures that I've pulled over from their actual portal and what it'll look like so that you can envision it in your head how that flexible funding model I showed you a slide before translates into how do we apply. Okay, next slide, please. So I mentioned the development box to you. The development box actually has what's called 2 tracks. Now, why are we calling it tracks in the portal, which is different than a base box in the funding model? Well, I want you to think of it like this. We want to encourage a streamlined and effective application for you all so that you're not trying to hunt all over the application portal to figure out what direction you go. You can pick track 1 or track 2 under development, read what's required and read what you can work on in that, and then it'll take you in that direction. And think of it as a train track. We're all at the train station together at the portal, and we're going to pick what track we want to go on. Okay, there's a total of 3. You'll see the next one here in a little bit for maintenance and advancement. But at development, you have 1 or 2. If development box is what you want to work on, you're going to pick one of these tracks. And what does this do for you? NEHA built it in a way that it's a train track. You're not trying to figure out which off-ramp you need on I-75 in Cincinnati with the bridge closed, right? It's a one-way ticket. I'm going to pick track 1, and that's what I'm going to follow. And it's intuitive enough to know that not only am I picking track 1 and I fill out my information, but it's also going to tell me what other options I'm available with. I'm not going to accidentally waste my time putting in for capacity building if I don't have the requirements, right? And so that's how it's built into tracks. So think of it that way when you're trying to decide which base box you want and then figure out what track you're going to follow. So once you hop into one, you'll be able to follow it in the portal until you're in your submission of your application, okay? All right, so under development, there are 2. The first track is for those jurisdictions that either don't have a self-assessment or they don't have a comprehensive strategic improvement plan. For those that are unaware of what a comprehensive strategic improvement plan, I'll walk through that with you in just a minute so you have that definition at hand. But those are 2 things that you can work on in track 1. And if you're going to work on those things, you'll have access to only a couple other options in that optional add-on. We'll walk through that in a minute. If you choose track 2 is for those jurisdictions that have their self-assessment, they have a comprehensive strategic improvement plan, and they're ready to do additional work. They want to do continuous improvement work. And that track allows them some different optional add-ons based on the things that they already have done, okay? So think about it. If you're thinking development-based works for you and which one you're going to be in, you kind of have an idea, right, of what the requirements are for track 1 or track 2 and where you might fall. Next slide, please. Something to remember with track 1 is you're going to work on one or the other, right? Self-assessment or comprehensive strategic improvement plan. If you don't have a self-assessment, you got to do that first. If you have a self-assessment, but you don't have a comprehensive strategic plan, that's what you would apply to work on. There are additional optional add-ons that are available to you in this track. There'll be no confusion on what you can and cannot apply for. It's already set in motion in the portal, so you'll have access to just the things that you can consider. Optional add-ons would be being a mentee in the mentorship program. There's also a training, staff development, and program standards development activity that you can participate in, and that training would be self-assessment and verification workshop only. If you haven't done those two activities, the SA9 or the Comprehensive Strategic Improvement Plan, you can't go to a variety of training at this time. We need you to complete those basic activities with your grant funding. Next slide, please. What does a Comprehensive Strategic Improvement Plan mean? As many of you are probably aware, we've described this several times over the last bits of summer and into the May, even into the spring of 2021. But let me just walk you through in case there's any confusion. A Comprehensive Strategic Improvement Plan is really taking your self-assessment, right? We've done that, we've completed it, we see where our gaps are, and it's pulling the gaps out so that you can have a plan for the future for your jurisdiction. It's your working plan. It's not something to turn into FDA, although you have to prove that you've done one, right? If you're saying that we've done this work, but this is your working document. We've taken all our gaps and we've slipped them into a plan, and it could go over multiple years, right? Nobody expects every gap in your SA9 to be completed this year or this funding cycle, but it's your game plan for what are we going to work on first? What are we going to tackle second? What do we have the resources to do? If you're looking on your screen, you'll see some information that kind of looks like an outline of a plan. On the right-hand side is just an example of some things that might be in the plan. On the left is an example of what a plan might look like, right? You know, what is it that we're missing in the standards? What's the deliverable? What might be an action step? What might be the target dates? We're going to complete this in 2021 or 2025, or what is it that we're trying to work on, right? This will assist you in many ways in your jurisdiction alone, but also planning what you would like to get help and funding for, right? And that it's easier to ask for things when we know what we need. And so this is one way that we can do that, okay? If you would like an example of the Comprehensive Strategic Improvement Plan, and it can look any way you want. This is an example on your screen. It is not a mandatory document, nothing like that. Please reach out to your retail food specialist. They have access to examples like this that you all can utilize if you want. They'll also be going over that information later on in the week when we get to the different seminar activities, I believe on Thursday, okay, the workshops. Next slide, please. Great. Okay, so remember, track 1, self-assessment or working on the Comprehensive Strategic Improvement Plan. So let's say your jurisdiction is not quite ready to go gung-ho, right, with maintenance and advancement. We're not there yet, but we do want to work on certain parts of our program and try to advance those, okay? So you want to work on continuous improvement within the standards. You met the self-assessment, you've got a Comprehensive Strategic Improvement Plan. You're going to pick track 2 so that you can work on continuous activities to improve your program, right? There's an opportunity for you to work on other things if you pick track 2. Just like in track 1, when you go into that application portal, you're going to see track 2. You're going to be able to click on track 2, and it's going to lead you down the path, that train track, right? You're not going to end up somewhere over in track 1 or track 3. It's going to lead you down what you can and cannot apply for and explain things to you, okay? So track 2, you've decided we're working on continuous improvement in this development box. And the other things that are available to you, one is a public health metric. That's a risk factor study, activities associated with that. It's an intervention strategy. That's a special optional add-on that's in the development box for those working in track 2, right? And if you look at, if you go back and watch any of the old videos, right, the old presentations with the very detailed things when it comes to the model, you'll see that for those working in continuous improvement, there's an option for extra funding to work on a public health metric, okay? So that's an optional add-on. You're also available to be in the mentorship program, either a mentee or a mentor. You also can do training, staff development, and program standards engagement. You can apply for capacity building activities and special projects. That's the track. Those are the opportunities if you pick track 2 in development. Next slide, please. Public health metric often seems to be a little confusing for people. Maybe it's not the term we've always used, although sometimes used. Public health metric encompasses a lot, right? It's really that risk factor study or something equivalent, okay, that you're working on to determine, your risk factor occurrences and trying to develop intervention strategies to prevent those activities. When you're working in public health metric, right, you get that extra funding in track 2. You say, yep, we're all going to do continuous improvement, but we also need to be working on this. Maybe you've already done your risk factor study or something similar, right, that's allowed in the standards. And maybe you want to work on an intervention strategy. You can do that here. This is an opportunity for you to do that here. You may need to work on redoing your risk factor study, or maybe you've done part of it, right, out of those 4 categories. Maybe you've been able to get to 2, and now you need to work on the other 2, and you're going to ask for funding to do those activities. You can do this. It is an optional add-on to do this work. You need to keep in mind, though, track 2 and track 1, because it's development, is a 1-year cycle. So you need to keep in mind when you're applying for action items and what you're going to do for your project, that it's a 1-year cycle for the grant time frame. As a whole, you may have it stretched out over multiple years for how you're going to do stuff, which is great because that'll help you in the next year to apply for funding, or the next year, because you can keep moving forward in your process. Okay, so keep that in mind. Next slide, please. All right, track 3, maintenance and advancement. So other base box, right? We had development, and there's 2 tracks. This one has 1 tract only because there's not a split off of jurisdictions that are brand new and ones wanting continuous improvement. When we move down in maintenance and advancement, these are jurisdictions that are ready to move forward with their program. There's a couple things you need to keep in mind. Again, not getting into all the specifics about maintenance and advancement, right? But it is a 3-year commitment, right? It's a 3-year grant, and it has varying rates for the activities that you can perform in there. What you need to keep in mind is you have to have a self-assessment, right? It has to be current. You have to have completed a comprehensive strategic improvement plan, and you have to have completed 1 or more retail program standards that's been verified, right? And we want to make sure the jurisdictions that are getting into this program fully are prepared and committed to moving their program forward, okay? One thing to keep in mind, we do understand that there are many people who in the last few months likely redid their self-assessment, right? It was time to do it, the 5-year cycle to back, or maybe they hit near their 5-year cycle and were ready to do that. And some of them had verified a standard, let's say standard 1, verified 6 months ago, verified that yes, we met that standard. Now I've done my self-assessment and I still believe that I absolutely meet that, but I'm waiting on my verification audit. You can still apply under this if you fall into that category, okay? You must state in your application when you will be getting that verification audit done. Remember, you have 6 months from that self-assessment to get that done. If you need assistance in understanding this, or you need assistance in finding some information out for verification or anything like that, or turning in a paperwork so that it is updated in the listing for FDA, please reach out to your retail food specialist. They absolutely can assist you in that, and it'll assist you in understanding any of the timelines or anything like that, okay? They're the experts in the retail program standards. Next slide, please. Okay, so in maintenance advancement, there's a lot of similar things to the other 2 tracks, but there's one thing that's a bit different. I described information about the public health metric in development. And in development, it was an option, right? Maintenance and advancement, it is not an option. It is required unless you have met standard 9 that you must work on public health metric, okay? You can also apply under maintenance and advancement in that same box, public health metric you have to do, repeat self-assessment, continuous improvement, conformance, and maintenance. There's varying rates for that of how much money you can ask per standard, per activity, that sort of thing, right? And I'll tell you where you can get all that information if you haven't seen it before on the various presentations, but those are the activities that you can work on under maintenance and advancement. And in this track 3 down this train track, you again have the opportunity for those optional add-ons All of them are available to you. Mentorship, where you can be a mentee or a mentor, depending on your needs or your wants, right? If you want to be a mentor. Training, staff development, and program standard engagement, capacity building, and special projects. Next slide, please. So public health metric is slightly different with track 3. Remember, I said it is a requirement, not a choice like in track 2, right? It's a requirement. So you can do work and perform work on a risk factor study or something very similar, right? You can read in the standards what activities are included when it comes to that. You can reach out to your retail food specialist if you need clarification or assistance with that. You can work on performing and developing and implementing an intervention strategy. That's also activities, because you may still fall in that boat, kind of like in track 3, where maybe we've already done the risk factor study, but we're in implementation, right? We're working on the intervention strategy. You would still apply to do that work. It isn't a requirement that only people that have to do both get into the system. If you have already done one or done part of your activities, you need to explain that, right, in your application, that we have completed this and we will be applying to work and maintenance and advancement on these activities related to the public health metric, okay? Remember, this is a 3-year grant, so you have a longer period of activity time, right, to get things done. And so you may work on certain portions in year 1 and an intervention strategy in year 2, while you're doing some other risk factor study activities with maybe different type of retail retail organization that you monitor, right? Whatever it might be, schools or whatnot. You can split those things up within the 3 years. So be mindful of that as you're planning that out, that it's a 3-year planning period for you to determine what you're going to do each of those 3 years, okay? Next slide, please. So the optional add-ons, I talked about these just briefly, listed them on the side. I wanted to at least have one slide for those that had not gotten general information and then gotten the specifics with the presentation before, that you had an idea of what those optional add-ons look like. The mentorship program, mentees can get up to $14,000 for the 1-year cycle. Mentors can get up to $24,000, depending on how many mentees they take on, okay? Mentorship program is very similar to what we've offered in the past. NEHA has partnered with NACCHO, who had done the mentorship program for, I think, the last 10 years, many years, to offer this program again. And it is very similar to the way we've always operated. It has been a very successful program for FDA and for all our SLTT jurisdictions that have participated. And so that program continues as you've known it. You just go through a different portal to get to the application process, okay? Training, staff development, and program standards engagement. You can get up to $75,000 a year. It's a 1-year cycle. This is very much like other times that you've applied for training or going to certain conferences that are significant for program standard engagement, okay? You're going to apply for the same type of things, who's going, you know, the travel and paying for the registration, things like that, okay? Very similar to what we've done in the past. There's also special projects, which is just slightly different. Special projects is not a project that's specific to just your little jurisdiction. I don't want to say little, that's not what I mean, because I know many of you all have lots of large activities going on, but it's not meant for just your jurisdiction. It's meant for something that has to do with the integrated food safety system. It's something bigger than just what we're doing in the retail program standards. And so if you have some ideas that advance the integrated food safety system, this might be a great opportunity for you. It's up to $20,000 for a 1-year grant cycle. Capacity building is one that we're very excited about. It's an opportunity. Of course, you can see the funding. It's up to $100,000. It's for each year of the 3-year grant. You'll see that all these numbers are up too, because you will have to provide information about your budgeting and what you're planning to do with the funds. It's not just you automatically get the $100,000, so be mindful of that. But that $100,000 can be used for FTEs, right? It can be used for a program standards coordinator who is working to do capacity building activities with other jurisdictions, or with, you know, it could be a state that's working with multiple local jurisdictions to bring them all on board for one particular thing. It might be a uniform inspection system. It might be that jurisdictions where a state does not actively participate in retail and all the locals are doing their own thing can collaborate together in a regional type activity where they all end up on the same uniform inspection method. That is just one example. It could be partnering with academia, right? And trying to get managerial control videos that are in multiple languages that any jurisdiction anywhere in our state, local, territorial, tribal partners can use instead of making their own, right? There's all kinds of activities related to capacity building. I would add, though, that it is important that self-assessment, comprehensive strategic improvement plan, and then a project implementation plan are all required for these. There's those exceptions I mentioned with track 1, where if you don't have that self-assessment or that comprehensive strategic improvement plan, you can still participate as a mentee or still participate in that one training for the self-assessment verification audit. But otherwise, these add-ons require those particular activities. And you may say to yourself, what is a project implementation plan? I thought we just talked about a comprehensive strategic improvement plan. What in the world? Too many plans. Don't worry. These are probably things that you have done in the past when you've applied for grants. We're just calling it a name, right? It's action items. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Next slide, please. Project implementation plan. Again, this is an example, not a requirement. For those that may have participated, let's say in the retail standards cooperative agreement, that's $70,000. You wrote one of these. You wrote a project implementation plan, but it was probably narrative for many. Some, they did a strategic outline that said, these are the different action items we're going to do as part of our project. But many of my jurisdictions wrote it in narrative form versus something like this, and that was okay. It's your job to pull out the project implementation plan. What action items are you going to do if you are given this grant money, right? We have to be able to assess what your activities are going to be, how you're going to spend that money, what resources do you have the resources, right? And so it's important to have a project implementation plan. So here's kind of 2 examples. The top box is just the jurisdiction and the project lead and that sort of, basic information. But the 2 on the bottom are 2 different examples. One is for a 3-year plan, right? And one is for like a 1-year plan, although you could use it for a 3-year plan. And these are just 2 examples of a way that you can break out on how you're going to determine what do we need and what are we asking for? What can we commit to doing if we get the funds, right? So that is what it is. And you've probably done this all along. You probably just didn't call it a project implementation plan, right? We just call it a PIP, right? It's just a name that we have. So what's important to remember here is that you can reach out to your retail food specialist. They have copies of these examples, right? That you can utilize, make your own, adapt it, right? Because you'll be able to mix them up and change them if you need to your own needs. This format is not required. So just keep in mind, this would be what you do, and you can just copy the information over into the portal, okay? Next slide, please. All right, additional information. So this is where it gets good. Your retail food specialist is your best friend. Please reach out to them with any retail program standards questions you have. They are well-versed in the retail flexible funding model. They are well-versed in lots of resources that are available in their toolbox to share with you. I know that we have been sending out information left and right to many jurisdictions all summer long, providing as much detail as we can about the flexible funding model. Now we're moving into the phase where the portal is open and we are ready for you to come in and register and then start applying. But reach out to them if there's something confusing to you, or maybe you hadn't seen one of my presentations. Please reach out to them. They will absolutely assist you in those activities. What else can you do? Go to the NEHA webpage, neha.org/retail grants to learn more. There's a lot of this information I went over today and specific details on that webpage, including guidance for how to apply, including guidance to tell you what steps do I take first, or what can I apply for, or where do I fall in track 1, track 2, or track 3? I'm so confused. There's too many trains. I don't want to do this. So they can help you there. Lots of information, okay? Attend the retail seminar workshops at the end of this. Those retail food specialists, man, they have worked hard and they are prepared to provide you information to make it so much easier for you to be able to apply, right? To pull your information together. And even if at the end of the day, you say, you know, we decided we're not going to apply, your program will be better for it because you will have a comprehensive strategic improvement plan in place and you'll have a game plan for some projects that you all want to do. So I highly recommend that you attend that, whether or not you want to apply for funding, okay? There's also going to be a 50-state call on September 21st at 1 p.m. We've pushed out that notice with the information. If for some reason you do not have it or it hasn't been filtered down to you, again, reach out to your retail food specialist. They do have a copy of that information, and we'd love for you to be on that call. What's going to happen at that 50-state call is NEHA is going to be on with us, right, at FDA to walk you through what the portal is. What does it look like before you even step in if you haven't already? They'll walk you through that so you can see if I pick track 1, what does it look like? What does that information look like? Okay, we know this is new. We want to make sure you have every opportunity to see and understand both the flexible funding model and the portal, okay? And so I hope you'll attend, and there'll also be time to ask questions. This is both for the people that have never been into the portal, and this is for people that are currently in there and are working and may have a question or two. We'll have the right people on to give you the right information. Next slide, please. Okay, application assistance. I mentioned before, your best friends, the retail program standards. Questions, go out to the FDA retail food specialist. We couldn't live without them here in FDA. They are the king and queens of knowledge when it comes to the retail program standards. Reach out to them. They have a lot of answers when it comes to the program standards, the flexible funding model, but also if you're having trouble with the portal or you don't understand something in the portal, or if it reads strange to you and you're walking through this application process and you think, that's crazy, I don't even understand what that word is or what it means, please reach out to NEHA. They have 2 ways for you to reach out. You can go email them and they will respond to you. You can also use their toll-free number. They have support staff available all the time to answer your questions if you're having any trouble in the portal. If it's something related to the retail program standards, though, they're going to shoot you back to your specialist. So please make sure you keep that in mind. Their job isn't to make sure that they help you with that part. So if it's a retail program standards question, make sure you go to the right experts, okay? So they're the experts on the application and portal at NEHA. Next slide, please. Application portal closing. Please be mindful, November 15th at 7:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the portal will close. There will be no exceptions. It doesn't matter if you had any issues. This applies regardless of how we have you all apply for grants. If you were applying to grants.gov, same thing applies. You hit that deadline. There's nothing we can do to assist you. So please make sure you take time before November 15th to have everything in order and submit that application. I did this screenshot. I thought it was kind of fun. This is actually what the access to the grant portal looks like. However, there's also a video that you all might like. It's a promo video for the flexible funding model. It includes other people besides me, but my face made a web page. So I felt it appropriate to cut and paste it onto the slide. How often does that happen, right? That you get to be on a web page, I guess if you're in jail or something, you'd be on a web page, but I don't want that one. So I copied and pasted over here just for fun, but there's other great people in that video to promo the retail flexible funding model and our work with NEHA on this project. Next slide, please. All right, if you have feedback, Office of Partnerships welcomes your feedback. If you have any questions about my presentation or any activities that Office of Partnerships is involved in, please provide any feedback that you like. There's an email address right there at any time, and that goes to the director, not to me. So I even take negative feedback. So if you want to send that, that's fine, but positive is always better. So if you got any of that, I'd appreciate that as well. Next slide, please. And Tricinda, I think it's back to you for any questions I need to answer.
Oh, thank you, Maribeth. You had a lot of great information provided during your presentation. There are a few questions. I think I'll just start by when everyone goes to the Passable page, on the very bottom right-hand corner of every page, it says a link to your retail food specialist. So no matter if you're on the home page, if you're on a breakout session, if you're on the workshop page, there is a link that directly goes to to all the retail food specialist contact information per state. So that was one of the first questions, so I did answer that one. Maribeth, a couple other questions. Could you please explain who the grant really applies for? Is it feasible for a one-person health department to apply and do these things that you're talking about?
Sure, of course. So, of course, this applies to all our state, local, territorial, and tribal partners, right? And we realize that there are a variety of different capacities within your organization. We understand, like I said, that there's some states that don't participate in retail, and every individual health department all across the state is responsible. And many of them have a couple people, and that one person may be doing pool inspections and food inspections and probably COVID at this point, and all the other things, right? I mean, we're dog bites. We had that happen at our house during COVID. Dog bites, the health department showed up. So many things, but can you still do it? Absolutely. Moving any program in a good direction and making it a unified method for how you all are handling retail activities is always a good thing. So let's say you're a one-woman or one-man show, and that's the health department for retail, and you enroll, right? You reach out to your retail food specialist who's appropriate for you, for your area, and you enroll. And of course, you can speak with them and you do a self-assessment, right? It can take you some time to do that, but you could apply for funds to do that, right? That could be FTE hours that you apply for. And I'm sure any jurisdiction would love to have grant funding, play for some FTE time, right? For you to do this work and do a self-assessment, the most basic of things for this retail program standards, to at least show you where your program is. And then you can pick one thing to work on, right? What if it's just one thing, like I always use uniform inspection, right? What if it's you don't have a process down for how you're doing inspections? Maybe it's just not written down. You're doing the same thing always, but you don't have that method established, right? That's something you can do. That's something you can do. So anybody, any size can apply. You would probably fall under track 1 at this point if you haven't been participating in the standards at this point. But even track 2 would be an opportunity to have that happen. So that is still evolved. Did I miss any part of that question? I feel like I lost a part.
No, Maribeth, I think that was very good. Thank you. It does not really apply to industry. That was I think one of the main questions on there.
Sorry. Yeah, I skipped. No, this is really for our state, local, territorial, and tribal retail regulatory partners, right? That's who this funding is for.
Thank you. Another question, Maribeth, is this something that can be applied for on a yearly basis? So if you don't get selected perhaps in 1 year, or you're not prepared yet, will the grant be renewed for applications for next year?
Sure. So a couple different parts to that. The flexible funding model has 2 different areas, right? We talk about development. We're just getting started, or we're trying to continue the efforts that we've done, but we're not ready to make these huge steps. Those are 1-year cycles. So next year that will be open. Examples of that are either track 1 or track 2, right? Anything that's in development, the mentorship program, the training section, the training, staff development, and program engagement. And then also special projects. Those are all 1-year cycles. So let's say you're not ready, but next year you have your self-assessment, you have your comprehensive strategic plan, you decide to go through track 2 and do continuous improvement. You also want to do a special project. Those are all 1-year cycles. Now, if you're a group that, you're ready to make that bigger commitment, that bigger step, and you do maintenance and advancement, that's a 3-year cycle. That will only be open every 3 years, okay? It's just one of those commitments for 3 years. The only other one in the model that is like that is also capacity building, because these are really big projects and big initiatives. So they happen, over an extended period of time. So if you're not quite ready, or if you like to take those small chunks, right, and those small activities to move your program forward, development, either track 1 or track 2, depending on where you fall, is the way for you to go. And it will be available to you every year. Okay.
Thank you, Maribeth. Is part of the grant implementation to share the results in a centralized place? Or is there a way for others to see what the states have accomplished if they've already developed the resources?
Sure. So, of course, every project will be different, right? What Maribeth's jurisdiction is going to do is different than Tricenda's jurisdiction. Even if we're working on the same project, it can look very different depending on the resources that we have even, right? What maybe Tricenda's has all the computer systems they need. Maybe I don't, right? So that's an extra element, okay? You're going to be required to report in information on the actions you said you were going to do when your application was approved and what you actually got done. And while the back end has not been developed yet of how do we display and provide information on what others have done, what other projects have been done. If you recall in our previous, one of our previous grants, one of the 3 that we used to offer for retail that ran through AFCO, they had a wonderful page that explained information about other projects that people had done through the years, right? Through the different categories. And I imagine that we will have something similar to that. That backside hasn't been developed yet because we're not there yet, right? We're not there where we have these projects and people have completed them. So I foresee something like that, but that's not there today, okay?
Thank you, Maribeth.